Welcome into the second episode of the Coaches Corner, where we take a deep dive into some of the best coaches around the area. In episode 1, our Kayla McGee spoke to Theo Dean, the girls basketball head coach of the Truman State Bulldogs. Well, today we kind of follow suit with the Ottumwa Bulldogs and Coach John Jaeger right here with me for episode 2. Coach, thank you so much for taking the time.
Appreciate it.
Much appreciate you. We're in the baseball dugout here, but you, sir, are so much more than just a baseball coach. You're assistant to the football team, girls wrestling head coach, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But, can you tell me about your coaching journey and how it got started?
I kind of got started just, growing up around athletics. My dad was a college football coach for 30 plus years up at Luther College. And so just from the first day I arrived, I was on the gridiron with him. And then just, being a part, my family's been a part of athletics. I was a 4-sport athlete in high school, played 2 sports in college, and just through the course of that process, I came across a lot of good coaches that really inspired me along the way, and I just realized that between teaching and coaching was kind of my calling, and so I've had a few stints here and there, different places. I've coached at the college level. I coached at Central College for a couple of years, playing baseball right out of school. About 13 years ago, one of my college teammates called me and said they had a teaching job and baseball job open here in Ottumwa, and we debated about coming back, but my wife and I were both from Iowa at the time, and so we decided to come back home and get closer to family, and I just, like I said, I've been around athletics. It's in my blood. It's my passion. And hence why I coach multiple things and teach PE, and that kind of goes hand in hand. And so, I don't know what else I would do if I wasn't teaching and coaching, honestly. And, the thing about it is you create so many relationships with kids and families. You don't realize how many people you really touch on a daily basis and on a yearly basis. And when you really think about it over the years, you're touching thousands of lives, and there's a lot of other jobs out there that don't do that. And so I feel very blessed to be able to work with these individuals and hopefully teach them not only lessons in sports, but also just lessons in life as well.
So would you say that was kind of what the big draw was to take you from the college ranks to the high school ranks? Because a lot of the times, coaching kind of goes the other way. You start high school, you move to college, and one day of the pros, but you kind of went the other direction.
Yeah, it was one of those things where right after I played in college, I did my student teaching to get my license, and I had an opportunity to go coach at the college level for a year. Some life things happened where I ended up getting married and we moved to Wisconsin, and I pursued some college levels, but just nobody took, and so I went back to the high school ranks, and honestly, after being at the college and then at the high school, I really enjoy the high school aspect of it. I think the benefit I had of coaching at the college level now with high school level is I can kind of work with these individuals at the high school level in terms of what college coaches are looking for. Having that experience when I was recruiting, what were certain things that we look for. And, it's not always about the stats, especially anymore, and you see more stuff out there about what college coaches are really looking for. They're looking for, what's their effort, how do they handle certain situations, how are they as a teammate, and trying to instill that into our kids that, yes, the stats are there and they know your stats, but when they come to watch you, they're looking for other aspects. How do you carry yourself as a person? And, I don't think they always understand that part of it.
It's very interesting, too, because at the high school level, there's a lot more participation, Kids are just trying to be active or play with their friends, and you get them from freshmen to seniors, but you got guys who just are here to play, but there's some guys that if they just tone a little bit, they're ready for the next level. And how do you tone that and then build and develop that type of athlete?
I think it's just you got to coach everybody individually. There's obviously aspects where you coach them as a whole, but you want to try to get the best out of every kid. And some kids, their best is not as good as somebody else. You look at those pros; those guys are freaks. Just genetically they have it in them, and we don't have that all the time. So our goal as coaches is just trying to develop them to be the best person that they can be. And then obviously, as these kids pursue, their years in high school, trying to say, okay, hey, this kid, has this talent. From playing to coaching, you kind of understand what it takes for them to play at certain levels, and just getting them to understand that aspect of it. Especially nowadays, it seems like college sports are, even at the Division III level, are become more demanding. Nowadays, it's there's fall baseball, there's spring football, and it's very time consuming, and getting these kids to understand, like, it's a commitment. When you go to college and play, no matter what sport it is, no matter what level, there's a big commitment there, whether it's on the practice field, but also understanding how to manage your time, your studies, because it's a grind. It's challenging, and I always tell kids, if you can get through that first semester of college, whether with academically or athletically, you've made good strides, because there's a big learning curve that first semester for sure.
We mentioned coaching's in your blood. It's who you are. It's your calling, and you coach multiple things, wrestling and football, as well as you were coaching baseball. Do you find it challenging to coach multiple sports, or what goes into having to shift the mindset, if you will?
Biggest thing for me is just trying to figure out which seasons in, which one's in season, which one's out of season. But at the same time, when you're out of season, there's still stuff that you got to do. And I think for me, having played 4 sports has helped me understand that priority and how to switch gears when it comes to it. And I was successful at the 4 sports that I played, and so I think that helps a little bit too on my understanding of what it takes, not only on the football field, but on the wrestling mat and on the baseball field, and just trying to, hardest part sometimes just organizing all that stuff, prioritizing. I mean, when you think about it, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, administrative stuff, especially at being a head coach. There's a lot of outside the scenes stuff that people don't see. The field stuff is awesome, but there's a lot of gritty work on the outside too that isn't so fun sometimes. But it's part of the job, and I think that's ultimately why some people don't want to be head coaches, because there is that administrative side of stuff, that paperwork that isn't always the fun stuff, But obviously, being a head coach, is you like being in charge. You have to like being in charge, and you gotta like to do things the right way. With the baseball program, we're here at Legion Field. When I first came in, it was a city park that the city owned, and we leased it. And within a couple of years ago, the school purchased it. And I just look at all the things that have been done here in my 12 years, and it's pretty incredible to think back of all the changes that have happened, and it's a credit to our school district allowing us to be able to do, if I have an idea, I bring it up to them, and it goes hand in hand with, what our superintendent, Mr. McGrory, has always talked about, is being the best, and that's what we want to be down here at the ball field, is be the best. And when people come into this stadium, we want to show them the best.
You said a lot in that answer that I kind of want to touch on, because I think it's a really cool point about being a coach. And you talked about liking to be in charge, wanting to do things the right way, and the way Ottumwa holds it, being the best. Talk about the pressure that comes with being a head coach, because even at the high school level, yeah, you're teaching kids, but there's still an expectation to win and in Ottumwa be the best.
One of the things is especially when you get to the varsity level, is it's not always perfect as you think. Yes, you want to give every kid opportunities as much as you can, but at the same time, we do need to win ball games, and the goal is for our varsity teams to make playoffs and get to the state tournament. And so sometimes you do get those hiccups, and you get those situations where not everybody is happy. Like I said, it's I think a lot of times people see the good side of coaching, but then they don't always see the tough side of coaching either. And it's, again, being a head coach is tough, because you got to deal with those tough situations with whether it's athletes or the community or parents or whatever it is. And It takes kind of a special person to do that type of thing. And so, but it's, like I said, we're trying to teach things the right way. You're always learning. To me, you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. And, I've been told that a million times by a lot of coaches. My dad, who I really look up to, anytime I need anything, he's the first one I call. He's been a huge inspiration in my life. And, he's not always the most vocal guy, but when he talks, he's usually got something pretty good to say. So, I had a very good upbringing, and I really appreciate what my parents did for me.
As much as you coach other things, I've always just kind of felt like there's just a special place for baseball in your heart. And what was that like growing up to have baseball be so big and then to bring it into Ottumwa as a head coach?
I grew up in a community just up in Northeast Iowa, Decorah, where, I was very fortunate to play for a Hall of Fame coach. Dennis Olenzak was his name. I believe he's the second winningest high school coach in the nation. And I tell you what, he coached very old school. He was hard on you, but he taught you the right way. And that's kind of where I started with the baseball, and he controlled our Little League all the way through. And so, he would be at every Little League game, and in the middle of a game, something would happen, and he'd stop the game, and he'd explain the whole situation to everybody. And I tell you what, so from the get-go, he taught us how to play the game the right way, his way. And obviously he's old school, so it's, as you got older, you butted heads every now and then. But and then when I went to college, Brian Galoglu was my college coach, and again, he was another guy that, did things textbook. He really preached technique, and he really upped my game a lot that way. And then when I went and coached at Central, and then when I was in Middleton, I feel like every head coach that I had, you always take away really good things, and then you obviously take away things that you think, oh, if I was going to coach, I probably wouldn't do it that way. But there was so much good that came from all those guys, and I don't know why baseball became my love. I think, ultimately football is probably my initial love, and I think that's why I went on to college to play both, and because I did love football, but there was always a special place for baseball.
Well, fast forward, you're in Ottumwa and the head coach of the baseball program, and you did that for 12 years. Over that course of time, what would you say you're most proud about of your 12 years being the coach of the Ottumwa Bulldogs?
Just the consistency that we have become as a program. I think the respect that we have gotten as a program down here in Ottumwa. And I don't always hear it, but I hear it from secondhand people, that hear other people talking up in Des Moines and other communities that really talk about Ottumwa baseball and how they do things the right way and how hard they play, and we got to be ready to play when they come, because at any moment they're gonna beat us. And I think to me that's huge. When I came in, I wanted to build a championship program, and obviously, this day and age, it's tough to compete against those suburban schools on a day-to-day basis. But I think that respect factor that, anytime Ottumwa shows up, whether it's here or on the road, teams don't, they don't think it's an easy win anymore. They got to be prepared. And if you really start looking at starting lineups and pitchers over the years about who we faced, anytime we come in, we're not getting teams 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th guys. We're getting one of their top 4 guys now, which to me is the respect factor that, hey, we gotta bring our dudes and we gotta be ready to play, because if not, we're coming for you.
Well, it's worked out well for you. This past year, you hit a pretty good milestone with over 300 wins.
Yeah.
What was that like when you found out that you had surpassed 300 wins in your career here?
At the moment, I didn't really think about it. I was like, 300 wins. But, when you really start looking back at, 12 years, you really start thinking like that's 25 wins a year. That's that's pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, when you're only playing
Yeah.
40 games, that's really good.
Yeah.
You know, and just trying to think back, you know, what we were like when I first took over versus where we're at right now. And it's, you know, from the get-go, I thought we were a pretty consistent ball club. You know, and a lot of that comes down to what you do at your lower levels. And, you know, I got to give credit to my assistant coaches. I mean, they've been a huge part of all those wins. And, you know, Coach Gomat has been a part of 280 of those wins. You know, he's been with me for 11 years now. And, you know, he came in green as could be, moved in from Florida. You know, hadn't done anything with baseball since college. And I tell you what, he took the ground running, man. You know, he worked with our pitching staff and he worked with our infielders. And from the day one, he was unbelievable. And, you know, you got to have good assistant coaches, partly because there's just, especially with baseball, there's so many aspects of it that you got to work on. And if one person tries to do all those jobs, I'll tell you what, you run yourself ragged. You know, so we've been pretty fortunate here at Ottumwa to put together a pretty good staff.
Well, you know, you give credit to the coaching staff as you should, credit to yourself as you should. Well, let's talk about the 12 years because after this past season, they're coming to an end as the head baseball coach as you announce you're stepping down from that position. You know, what went into that decision?
You know, I think there was a lot. There was quite a few factors into it. You know, but the biggest thing for me was just my family. I got three girls right now that are actively involved in sports. My oldest going to be a 9th grader, and my youngest being a 5th grader, and you know, trying to balance watching their activities on top of coaching baseball was hard. And trying to just juggle their schedules with my schedules. And you know, a lot of people told me, you only get to be a dad once, and you only get to see them play once. And so to me, I love watching them play. I love just going and sitting in the outfield and watching them play and develop. And, you know, I didn't want to miss that part of it. So it's, you know, it wasn't an easy decision. It was, you know, it's kind of been one I thought into last year. Kind of at the end of the year. But as the course of the season went on and, you know, like I said, trying to juggle and getting kids to where they need to be on top of my schedules and games, and that decision became easier and easier and easier. And, you know, I probably could have made the decision earlier in the season, but I guess to me it wasn't, I didn't want kids to think, hey, you know, this is Jaeger's last season, have that. I wanted them to play their season, and then, you know, by the end of the season I let them know that this was my last go. But yeah, it was just, you know, it's family. I want to be a dad. You know, I look over, you know, and sometimes it comes down to priorities, and being a coach, sometimes you don't always have your priorities straight, and I think for me it's coming down to that, where it's time to, you know, family's important, you know, and you know, sometimes it's too late, sometimes it's not, but I think right now is the right time to do it. So,
What do you think, you know, 12 years is a long time, and with something you love and a place you love, what do you think you'll miss most about being the baseball head coach?
I think biggest thing, just being around the kids, you know, and learning from them in those relationships piece. You know, it's interesting because, you know, kind of ever since the end of the season, I've talked to numerous people, and they've asked me kind of the same question. You know, what are you going to miss? What aren't you going to miss? And, you know, and has it hit you? Really, you know, it really hasn't hit me yet. And I'm sure it will come March, April, when you're really starting to gear up and stuff. But the coaching aspect of it is just, and being around the kids and being on the field will be probably the hardest part. You know, part of me wants to stay away, but part of me wants to just come back. But I feel like coming back and watching sometimes is a little harder because you want to be out there. But again, you know, like I said, my 3 daughters are playing softball, so I'm sure I'll spend a lot of time on the diamond over there watching them, and you know, just helping them out. You know, helping them with their crafts. You know, working on their hitting and things like that. and just kind of seeing where they go, because, all three of them are fairly athletic girls that do a lot of things, and they come by it very honestly, and they're competitive, and so I just want to kind of be there for them and help them out.
This has been a fantastic insight, this whole thing, and again, it's great to be able to sit down with you and have you give us this perspective. So I got one last question for you, and it's one of the more, in sports, probably one of the more talked about things, one of the important things when you look back on a career, and that word's legacy. And when you think about what you've done for Ottumwa baseball, what do you hope that people think about you as a head coach and what your legacy was that you left behind?
I hope people look back and see the hard work that we really instilled in our kids, and how we taught kids to play the game the right way. In this day and age, you're seeing social media and stuff. You're seeing the outbursts by kids and parents and things like that, and that's one thing we've always kind of cracked down on kids is the emotional side of things. When things don't go right, we don't act out certain ways, and that, to me, that's the thing, is we handle ourselves with class anywhere we go. We wear that Ottumwa jersey, and we want to represent our community and our school district everywhere we go, and I think our kids have done an unbelievable job of that wherever they've gone, and it's, baseball's grueling. It's a long but short season, and you put a lot of time into a season. When you start playing games, you're gone 3-4 nights a week, and every time you play, it's a long day, and you spend more time with these kids than you spend with your own family sometimes, and so they become part of your family. And so over the course of the 12 years, I've gained a lot of kids, and to see those kids come back after they've graduated and talk to you, and that those relationship pieces that you create with those kids is pretty cool, and seeing former players now, coaching for you and being married and have kids, and it's, kind of dates you a little bit too when you start seeing that. You're like, holy cow, I've been around here too long. But I think the biggest thing is just, like I said, just, the consistency that we've been over the last 12 years and what we've done here to the program, and making it a top-notch team year in, year out is to me is probably the biggest legacy. And the cupboards aren't bare, and sometimes coaches step down because different reasons, things like that, and sometimes they step down because they feel like there's not much left in the cupboard. But I can honestly say there's a lot of talent left in the cupboard, and whoever takes over the program, I think, is in good hands. There's a lot of kids coming up that are going to do a lot of good things. Our little league just had 9-year-olds and 12-year-olds had a pretty good summer this year with the all-star stuff. And then even, up through our 13, 14s, 15s, there's a lot of stuff there. So, it's going to be fun to see kind of where Ottumwa goes, and I hope it goes in the right way.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I think we covered a decent amount, man. It never fails, man. We do well, man.
Yeah,
I
appreciate
your time, Coach. And again, that was a great conversation, and appreciate you being our second coach on the Coaches Corner. And I don't think we could have picked a better person for episode 2. So.
I feel honored. It was, when you first brought it up, it was, I was on vacation, and I jumped right on it, because I think it's important that we, point out, people in the community, head coaches that, and obviously, I feel honored to be one of those. I never thought I would be one of those guys. But like I said, it's, it came from, just a lot of the past head coaches that I've had, and people that I've run along, and, it's a passion of mine that I want to be the best, and I want those around me to be the best as well. And it hurts when people aren't. But again, you learn from your failures and try to push forward, and God always says there's better days ahead, and so that's kind of the way I'm living my life, is just pushing ahead and learn from those mistakes, and try to be a better individual the next day. So.
Well, you wear it on your sleeve and you wear it well, and I promise, from what I know of the Ottumwa community, you've done the community proud. So
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you as well, and that's going to do it for episode 2 of the Coaches Corner.